Hi, I'm Varel. My parents left me a single thing in their will, an old broken bed. No money, no property, just that. At first, I thought it was an insult, but then I found what was hidden inside, and everything changed. Turns out, the bed wasn't broken. It was a message, a warning, a key to the truth they tried to bury along with my mother's name. The law office smelled like furniture polish and stale power. Mahogany walls, deep leather chairs, everything screamed wealth, tradition, and cold judgment. I sat quietly in the corner, pretending not to notice the subtle glances, the shared smirks between old partners and firm assistants. But I noticed everything. I always did. Kalen stood near the window, perfectly tailored suit, expensive shoes, and that smug little smirk that had followed him since high school. He looked like he already owned the place, and in many ways, he probably did. The estate, the business, the legacy, all of it. Me? I was the family footnote. Garrick Miles cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here this morning," he began, his voice as crisp as his pinstriped suit. "This reading is, of course, in accordance with the last will and testament of Thorne Vexley." He didn't look at me. No one did. I stared at my hands. I could still hear my father's voice, always talking numbers and margins, and my mother's voice, softer, but never loud enough to matter. I never measured up, not to their standards. Not to Kalen. The lawyer's words bled into one another until I heard my name. To Varel Vexley. Garrick paused, shifting awkwardly in his chair. "Our daughter, we leave the antique shaker bed currently stored in the attic." That was it. A bed. A busted, unused piece of furniture shoved into the dark corners of a house I wasn't even welcome in anymore. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Garrick cleared his throat again. "The bed. Your mother, Elira, had expressed that it held personal value." Kalen let out a low chuckle. "Guess someone's sleeping alone forever, huh?" Laughter rippled softly around the room, as if cruelty was some kind of sport. Garrick glanced at me, then away. His face flushed, but he said nothing. I didn't. I wouldn't. Not yet. After the reading, Kalen caught me in the hallway. "Don't take it personally, sis," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder like we were still in some childhood game. "Dad always said you had a knack for antiques. Guess he thought you'd appreciate junk." "Don't touch me," I muttered, stepping out from under his hand. He raised both eyebrows, feigning innocence. "Come on, you're still part of the family. Maybe we'll find you a spot at the foundation. Receptionist? Archivist? Something with less pressure." I walked away without another word. If I'd stayed, I might have screamed. By nightfall, I was back in my apartment. 2-bedroom, 3rd floor, nothing fancy but mine. The bed had already been delivered. It sat in the center of my living room, wrapped in moving blankets, looking even older than I remembered. Thick, carved wood, worn varnish, cracked at the joints. A metaphor, maybe. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Then I noticed the markings. Not just scratches or time-worn dings. Symbols. Deliberate carvings etched under the headboard. Shapes too regular to be random. I leaned in, running my fingers along one of the grooves. There was a knock at my window. My body froze. I turned slowly, heart slamming in my chest. Outside, parked across the street, a black SUV idled, engine humming low like a threat. I couldn't make out the driver, but the timing wasn't a coincidence. I walked to the window, pulled the blinds. My phone buzzed a moment later. Unknown number. "You don't know what you're sleeping on. Walk away." My stomach twisted. I tried calling back, straight to voicemail. I scrolled through my recent messages. Nothing from Kalen, but I knew his games. This was his way of telling me to stay in my lane. A text from my neighbor popped up next. "Jane, 2B. Hey, just FYI. Think someone was trying your door earlier? Creep me out. Be safe." I checked the locks, all 3. Deadbolt, chain, slide bar. Then I pulled the blankets off the bed completely and dropped to the floor, inspecting the legs, the slats underneath. One of the supports didn't match. Lighter wood, poorly repaired, not my father's style, not my mother's either. I sat back on my heels, staring at the broken frame. This wasn't a keepsake, it was a message. They gave me a broken bed, but something about it didn't feel accidental. My mother never did anything without meaning. And my father? He never left anything unless it was worthless or dangerous. I lay in bed that night, not even bothering to move the antique to the other room. I stared at it through the dark, heart-pounding, every creak in the hallway turning my blood to ice. They thought they could humiliate me into silence, but they gave me something they were afraid of. I didn't sleep. I lay there on the couch, blanket draped across my legs, eyes fixed on that damn bed. The wood grain seemed to move in the dark, like something inside it was breathing. That SUV never came back, but I kept checking the window anyway. And the text. I couldn't get it out of my head. You don't know what you're sleeping on. Walk away. Walk away from what? I wasn't the paranoid type. I restored centuries-old tapestries for a living. Attention to detail was my job. And right now, my gut was telling me that bed wasn't just a slap in the face. It was a setup, a warning, or a clue. Kalen. It had to be him. He always played power games, but this felt different, calculated. Like he knew I'd find something, maybe hoped I'd miss it. That wasn't just a threat, it was a leash. And I don't do leashes. I sat up and turned on the lamp, its yellow glow spilling across the room. My tools were in the hallway closet. Dental picks, soft brushes, angled blades. I grabbed the smallest one and kneeled beside the bed. I ran my fingers along the frame again, this time slower. There, near the base of the headboard. A hairline seam, smooth and too perfect. You wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. I pressed gently. Nothing. I angled the blade in and pried. A small click. I paused. My breath hitched, not in fear, but in anticipation. The panel gave way with a soft creak, revealing a narrow compartment, barely the size of a shoebox. Inside, a tightly rolled bundle wrapped in parchment. I reached in carefully and pulled it out, heart pounding, not from fear now, but adrenaline. I unwrapped the parchment slowly, like I was peeling away years of lies. Inside were several folded sheets, diagrams drawn by hand, blueprints, or at least that was my first impression. But the lines weren't just mechanical, they were artistic. Curved symbols, patterns tucked into corners. It wasn't just engineering, it was coded. One slip of paper fluttered loose. At the bottom corner, 3 initials in ink, E.V., Elira Vexley. My mother. My throat tightened. For a moment, the room fell silent. I forgot about Kalen. I forgot about the inheritance, the SUV, even the humiliation at the will reading. I was just a daughter holding a message from the one woman who had barely spoken above a whisper her whole life. I laid everything out on the floor, smoothing the pages with trembling fingers. There were layers, designs of mechanical parts overlaid with symbols I hadn't seen since graduate school. Hidden geometry, optical illusions, stenography maybe. My mother hadn't just been collecting antiques. She'd been encoding something inside one. They thought it was junk, I whispered, but they never looked. She'd hidden it in plain sight, because she knew I'd understand it. Not Kalen, not Dad. Me. I kept studying, flipping through each sheet. One was labeled Sequence 1, and another, Anchor Points, but without a key, I couldn't interpret much. I'd need time, and quiet. My phone buzzed again. Kalen. Let it go, Varel. You don't know what you're doing. I stared at the screen. Me. You're right, I don't, not yet. I set the phone face down. They didn't expect me to find this. Maybe they didn't even know it was there. But something in my mother's silence, something in the way she watched me during those last few months, was starting to make sense. She'd been trying to say something, trying to pass something on, and I'd been too wrapped up in feeling forgotten to notice. Well, I noticed now. I turned over the largest blueprint again. In the bottom corner, barely visible unless you tilted the page toward the light, a line of cursive handwriting appeared. Only she will understand. I stared at it for a long moment, breath caught somewhere between awe and heartbreak. My mother had been speaking to me, I said out loud, and now I was listening. I didn't cry. I thought I would, should, but instead, I just sat there on the hardwood floor, blueprint spread across my knees, chest so tight it hurt to breathe. There were too many emotions, layered like the lines on that drawing. Grief, regret, a strange kind of wonder. Only she will understand. Those words weren't a riddle. They were a door. I folded the blueprint with care and placed it in a folder, then padded into the kitchen to make tea. My hands were shaking. The kettle hissed. I needed someone to talk to, someone who had known her, really known her, someone who hadn't smiled through lies and handed me a bed like it was an afterthought. I picked up my phone and dialed Hestia. She answered on the second ring. "Virel? I need to see you," I whispered. "Please." She didn't ask why. "Come now." By the time I reached her house, dawn had just begun to tint the sky with light. Her porch light was on, just like always. She stood in the doorway, wrapped in a knit shawl, eyes already glistening. "Oh, honey," she said as I walked in. "It's finally happening, isn't it?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded. She made me sit, placed her hands over mine, like she used to when I was 10 and afraid of thunderstorms. Then she walked to the sideboard and pulled out a small wooden box, aged and familiar. "She gave this to me months before she passed," Hestia said, voice trembling. "Told me not to open it. Said it was meant for you, when you were ready to stop listening to your brother." I opened the box. Inside was an old digital recorder. I clicked play. The voice that came through was soft, weary, but unmistakable. "Virel, my darling, if you're hearing this, it means you found what I couldn't protect while I was alive." I pressed a hand to my mouth. "I tried, sweetheart. I fought for you. I even went to a lawyer to establish a trust, something that couldn't be touched. But your father, he found out. He called me unfit, said I was poisoning you with delusions. He threatened to take you away, said, if you make one more move, you'll never see her again." My chest ached. He made me small, Virel, in court, in front of our friends, even in front of you. And I let him, because I thought survival was quieter than war. The recording ended with a pause so long, I thought it was over. Then, barely a whisper. "But I've always believed in you. You see things no one else notices. And I prayed, every single day, that someday you'd stop believing them and start believing in yourself." I couldn't hold it anymore. The tears came silently, spilling down my cheeks as Hestia placed a tissue in my lap and said nothing. My mother had never been weak. She had been silenced. All those nights, I'd thought she was staring out the window in quiet defeat. She was planning, hiding, waiting. And I had hated her for giving up. But she never did. Not really. Hestia pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in years, I let myself be held like a child. "They never deserved her," I said against her shoulder. "No, they didn't," Hestia replied, but she made sure they'd never forget her. I left the house an hour later, sun fully risen, birds beginning their endless chatter across the Providence rooftops. I felt heavier than before, but also somehow steadier. As I pulled into my apartment parking lot, a black envelope sat tucked beneath my windshield wiper. Inside, a single line scrawled in block letters. "You're walking into something you don't understand. Turn back." I looked up, scanning the quiet street. Then I laughed. "Quiet, bitter, final. They keep warning me," I muttered, "but the only thing I don't understand is how they thought I'd stay quiet." 2 days passed. I barely left the apartment except to pick up supplies. Extra batteries, a burner phone, tools from my studio. I kept the blinds shut. Slept during daylight, drank black coffee at midnight. I didn't feel paranoid. I felt prepared. The symbols on the blueprint weren't just decorative. They were directional, coordinates embedded in overlapping angles. Once aligned, they pointed to a spot just outside the city. A place I didn't remember. A place my father wouldn't want on paper. I drove alone, headlights cutting through the dark stretch of road like a blade. My GPS kept glitching. Once, the screen blinked black for 5 seconds before returning to life. It didn't matter. I was already close. The warehouse looked abandoned. Cracked windows. Condemned signs peeling off the front. But the lock on the side gate? New, clean, recently installed. I parked half a block away and approached on foot. The air around the building felt stale, still, like everything inside was holding its breath. I found the side entrance, rusted but barely latched. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Sensors clicked on. Low amber lights flickered along the walls. A hum rolled beneath the floor, faint and steady, electric systems still running. This place wasn't dead. Someone had been keeping it alive. I walked past metal beams, empty crates, a conveyor belt frozen mid-motion. Then a voice came from the shadows. "You came, just as I hoped." I froze. The voice wasn't Kaylin's. A figure stepped forward, and my world tilted. It was him, Thorn Vexley, alive. I stumbled back a step, grabbing the nearest support beam. He looked exactly as I remembered. Same broad shoulders, same calculating eyes, but thinner, paler, like someone who had traded sunlight for control. "Dad?" I whispered. He smiled. "Not quite the ghost you expected, huh?" My legs felt like lead. "You're supposed to be dead. Death is relative," he said calmly. "Sometimes disappearing is more efficient than dying." Before I could respond, another figure stepped out behind him. Of course. Kaylin. He looked too pleased with himself. "Told you she'd figure it out." "You?" I looked between them. "You faked it. You both. This whole thing. What was it? A test? A game?" "Insurance," Thorne replied. "Your mother had started leaking information. Little things at first. Patents, names. Then she built that bed." My heart punched against my ribs. She didn't build it to store secrets. She built it to protect them from you. Thorne tilted his head. "She built it for you. That was her mistake." I stepped back, hand reaching instinctively toward my pocket. My phone, a recorder, anything. "She trusted me," I said, voice shaking, "because she knew you'd come after me next." He didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small remote, pressed play. A recording played through hidden speakers. Her voice again. "Elira Vexley, March 14th. Thorne threatened to have Varel removed from the home. Said if I didn't stop pursuing the trust, he'd file for custody, claim mental instability, fabricate medical reports. Said, 'She'll be mine before you can blink.'" My knees buckled. "That's enough," I snapped. Thorne turned off the recording. "You were never the target, Varel. You were leverage. You were the perfect pawn." A silence hung in the air like smoke. Then I spoke, lower than before. "You threatened to erase me." "No," Thorne said coolly. "I threatened to use you. Big difference." I clenched my jaw, stepping forward. "You don't get to define that." "You don't get to rewrite history, sweetheart," Kaylin added. "Mom lost. You were just too naive to see it." "You know what?" I said, my voice rising like a tide, slow but certain. "I might have been naive, but I see clearly now." Thorne took a step closer, voice low, almost sympathetic. "You're in over your head, Varel. If you walk away now, I'll forgive the trespass. Stay, and you'll regret it." I looked into his face, the man who taught me fear and called it structure. The man who claimed silence was safety. The man who tried to bury my mother in life and in death. "No," I said, meeting his stare. "You don't get to erase women anymore." I walked out of that warehouse with my pulse hammering in my throat and my fists clenched so tight, My nails left half-moon dents in my palms. "You don't get to erase women anymore." I didn't say it for them. I said it for her, for my mother, for the woman they spent years calling unstable, irrelevant, fragile. But she wasn't fragile. She was filtered out, censored, sanitized from their version of the truth. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the floor with the documents from the hidden compartment, pages spread across my living room like shattered glass. Blueprints, test notes, sketches, patent filings never submitted. It was all here, and nestled among them, folded inside an old manila envelope, was a laminated press clipping. Vexley Industries named Innovator of the Decade. The article praised the invention that had revolutionized small-scale energy transfer in urban housing infrastructure. The photo showed Kalen, grinning like he'd built the thing with his bare hands. But the diagram they used, the one displayed behind him during the award ceremony, was my mother's. Word for word. Stroke for stroke. Even her signature loop in the lower right corner was faintly visible beneath the company logo they'd slapped over it. I stared at that page, my vision blurring. My breath grew shallow. They didn't just take her voice. They took her genius, sold it, celebrated it, turned her into nothing while they bathed in applause. I whispered, they stole her brilliance and put their names on it. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a click, a decision. The next morning, I messaged a woman I used to follow during my undergrad days. Her name was Dana Fields, an investigative reporter who didn't pull punches and had a knack for blowing open corporate scandals. She agreed to meet in a downtown cafe 2 hours later. She arrived in a gray coat, messenger bag slung over one shoulder, laptop already open before she sat down. "All right, Varel," she said. "You said this wasn't just personal. Prove it." I handed her the folder. No hesitation. She flipped through the document slowly at first, then faster. Her brows drew closer together. "This blueprint," she muttered, tapping a corner. "Where did you get this?" It was hidden in an antique bed my parents left me, one that used to be in my mother's studio. "Are you aware this exact design was featured in the Vexley Industries patent suite 5 years ago?" "I am now." She looked up at me. "If these dates are accurate, and these sketches predate their submission, this isn't a dispute. This is theft, fraud, maybe even racketeering." "I don't need a court to tell me what I already know," I said quietly, "but I need the world to hear it." Dana leaned back, nodding slowly. "You realize what you're doing, right? This isn't just family dirt. This is going to hit a national level." "Good," I said. "Let it burn." That night, the article went live. Buried Genius. Was Vexley's legacy built on a stolen foundation? It started as a ripple on niche media. Within 2 hours, it was trending. Major outlets picked it up. My inbox exploded. Some of it support, much of it venom. "You should have stayed in your lane. You're ruining your family. Ungrateful little parasite." And from Kalen, of course. "You've made a big mistake." He didn't even try to mask it as concern. Just power trying to hold the last thread of control. I stared at his message for a long time, then deleted it. Instead, I picked up my phone, switched the camera to front-facing, and hit record. "My name is Virel Vexley. I'm an art restoration specialist. I'm also the daughter of Elira Vexley, a woman who created something brilliant and died with the world believing she was nothing." I paused. My hands trembled, but my voice stayed firm. "You told me to stay silent. I stayed silent too long. Now, I speak for her." I posted the video and powered off my phone. No hashtags, no tags, no theatrics, just truth. Plain, brutal, overdue. By morning, my inbox had imploded. Not even an hour passed before the retaliation started. Messages flooded in from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were silent. Others hissed veiled threats through encrypted apps. One read simply, "Nice move. Hope your fire alarms work." Then the building manager knocked on my door. "Miss Vexley, fire inspection, unscheduled." He looked nervous. Too nervous for a man who had worked here 10 years. I didn't open the door. Send them back with a warrant. He hesitated, then mumbled something and left. I watched him through the peephole, phone clenched in my hand. They were poking, pushing, seeing if I'd flinch. I gave them a chance to back off. They didn't take it. So I opened the last envelope, the one my mother had sealed with red wax and a note. Only if they come for you. Inside was a USB drive and a single sheet of paper. On it, 3 words. Clarity Protocol, Initiate. I plugged it into my laptop, and instantly, a password screen appeared. Blank, except for a blinking cursor. I didn't hesitate. The answer had been etched in that bed frame since the beginning. I typed in the first sequence of overlapping triangles from the blueprint. The screen flickered. Then her voice filled the room again. If you're seeing this, they came for you too. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting her voice wash over me. This system is a fail-safe, she said. Every file, every recording, every blueprint archived here, encrypted, ready to go where they can't bury it. You'll have one chance to activate it. A list of recipient nodes began to scroll down the screen. SEC, DOJ, EPO, YPO, CNN, The Guardian, Reuters, ProPublica. Hundreds of files populated the progress bar. Audio logs, internal emails, false statements, whistleblower testimonies with dates that made my stomach turn. Kaylin's voice on tape. She's already dead weight. Let's make sure she stays buried. My hand hovered over the final command. There was no going back. But there was also no other way forward. I clicked Upload. The screen turned black for a heartbeat, then filled with pulsing white light. Clarity Protocol activated. Secure transmission in progress. My eyes burned, not from tears, but from the clarity my mother had always believed I'd one day find. She had built this, hidden it beneath decades of silence, left it for the one person they never saw coming. Me. I watched the bar fill, 12%, 39%, 72%. Then, Clarity Protocol completed. Data integrity confirmed. All nodes received. The room fell still. My phone buzzed again. Kaylin, you've destroyed everything. I stared at his message. Then I typed back, not everything. Only the lie. I sat back, breath catching for a second. The sun had broken through the clouds outside, casting long stripes across the hardwood. My apartment had never looked brighter, or more like a war room. I didn't feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like the person my mother always believed I could be. Not just a witness, not just a voice. A reckoning. I walked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, and looked into the mirror. For the first time, I didn't see my father's disappointment or my brother's smugness. I saw me, unshaken. I leaned closer to the reflection, voice barely a whisper. Now we see who they really are when the masks come off. The next 2 days moved like a landslide. No control, no warning, only impact. Every news outlet ran a variation of the same headline. Vexley Empire implodes amid intellectual property scandal. Clarity Protocol leak sparks DOJ, SEC investigation. Buried genius. Who was Elira Vexley? I sat on my couch, knees hugged to my chest, watching it all unfold with the quiet intensity of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Stock prices dropped like a stone. Investors bailed. The board of directors called an emergency vote, then another, then stopped answering their phones altogether. By noon on the second day, the company's legal counsel issued a public statement. They welcomed cooperation with the investigation and would reevaluate internal systems and historic filings. Translation. They were scrambling. My phone didn't stop vibrating. Journalists, lawyers, former employees, some I hadn't seen since childhood. One of them texted, "They used her work. You proved it. We're behind you." I didn't want applause. I wanted accountability. And justice was now playing on every screen in America. A federal judge confirmed what I already knew. My mother's patents were never legally transferred. Her inventions had been hijacked, repackaged, and filed under Vexley Industries without her consent. The court not only voided those filings, but reinstated Alira Vexley as the rightful holder of every IP license connected to those innovations. And because I was her sole heir, ownership passed to me. The boardroom inside Vexley HQ looked like the aftermath of a battlefield. Half the chairs were empty. The remaining members sat stiff, pale, watching the SEC reps shuffle through files at the end of the table. I stood at the head seat. I didn't sit. Someone murmured, "She controls the patents now." Another replied, "We're working for her." I kept my voice calm. "You're not working for me. You're deciding whether to work for what's next." That's when the door slammed open. Kalen. His face was crimson, jaw clenched tight enough to snap. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You just blew up our legacy. You destroyed everything Dad built." "No," I said coolly. "You did that yourselves. I just turned on the lights." He turned to the board. "She's unstable. You all know this. This whole mess. She doesn't have the temperament to run anything." Silence. Then one board member, an older man with tired eyes, looked him square in the face. "Kalen, you forged documents and buried your own mother's name. You lost the right to call anyone unstable." Even security stepped forward when Kalen raised his voice again. "I will not be erased," he barked. "Not by her, not by anyone." "You erased her first," I replied. "And now everyone knows it." He stormed out. I didn't watch him leave. Instead, I turned to the table. "I'm not here to clean up your image," I said. "I'm here to make sure this company becomes what it pretended to be." No one challenged me. Later that evening, I stepped into what used to be my mother's private lab. Cleaned, restored, humming with low light and new purpose. It was quiet, but not empty. Her presence lived in every blueprint still tacked to the wall, every prototype lined with careful hands. I walked to the far end of the room, where a photograph of her had been boxed away years ago. I placed it on the center of the desk. She was smiling in it. The real kind. Proud. Peaceful. "They built this empire with stolen dreams," I whispered. "Now it belongs to the woman they erased." It had been a week. 7 quiet days since the board fell silent. Since Kalen vanished from the building, and the lawyers stopped circling like vultures. Since the press shifted their attention to the next scandal and left my mother's face, finally, framed in truth. But my chest still ached. I wandered the restored lab slowly, fingertips grazing the edge of her desk, the metal edge of a prototype, the faded ink of her handwritten formulas. It wasn't just equipment. It was her story, pressed into paper and wires. I won the battle, but I still lost her. No court ruling could give me back the time we should have had. No headline could undo the nights I spent wondering if she'd ever truly loved me, or if I had just been a reminder of everything she'd lost. That doubt had always haunted me, until Hestia called. She met me outside the old apartment she now shared with her daughter. Her hands were gentler than I remembered, her voice lower, weathered. "She asked me to wait," she said, pressing the envelope into my palm. "Until the storm passed, until you were ready." The envelope was cream-colored, heavy. My name written in long, curved strokes I knew by heart. Virel. I didn't open it there. I waited until I got home, locked the door, sat in silence, and let my fingers tremble just once before tearing it open. The letter smelled faintly of lavender. "My darling girl, if you're holding this, then you've done more than I ever could. You didn't just survive them, you saw through them, and you chose something better. I didn't leave you the company, or the money, or the approval you deserved. I left you something stronger. The truth." I stopped reading, breathing through the pressure building behind my eyes. "I know I failed you in ways you won't always be able to name. I let them silence me because I thought I was protecting you. But maybe I was also afraid. Afraid that if I fought too hard, they'd erase me completely and take you with them. You were never invisible, Virel. You were my reason." That line undid me. I sat there on the floor, clutching the pages to my chest like a life raft, sobbing into the sleeves of the sweatshirt she used to wear on rainy days. It smelled like dust now, but in that moment, it felt like her arms. The rest of the letter wasn't about the company. It wasn't about patents or revenge or strategy. It was about motherhood and the kind of love that survives even the cruelest kinds of silence. By the time I folded it and slid it into a frame, the world felt a little different. Not quieter, not easier, but honest. 2 days later, I received a single email from Kaylin. "You win, I'm sorry." No signature, no attachments, no blame. I didn't reply. Instead, I submitted paperwork to create the Elira Vexley Foundation, a memorial scholarship for women in invention and design. Full ride. No legacy names required. I gave the antique bed to the museum we launched with it. Visitors walk past it now, not as a symbol of rejection, but as the blueprint of a truth that outlived its burial. In my new office, formerly hers, I kept it simple. White walls, her painting, my tools, and her letter sitting framed beside my monitor. Not hidden anymore. Not encrypted. That night, after locking up, I turned off the lights, letting the skyline bathe the room in amber. I stared out across Providence and whispered to the dark, "You gave me a broken bed, but it held the blueprint to everything I needed to become." 2 months passed. The building didn't look the same anymore. It didn't feel the same either. Gone were the sharp edges, the sterile walls, the aura of dominance that used to hover like a shadow over Vexley Industries. Now, a new sign glinted in the morning sun. Aurora Innovations. In honor of Elira Vexley, whose light could not be silenced. I stood beside it as the plaque was unveiled, wind tugging at the hem of my blazer. Behind me, young inventors prepared their prototypes for the Foundation's first innovation fair. Nervous laughter bubbled up as they adjusted displays, tested code, rewired circuits. You could feel it in the air, energy without fear. I closed my eyes for a moment and imagined her standing beside me, arms crossed, chin tilted, that small, proud smile she used to wear when no one was watching. She would have liked this. Not the sign or the building or the name, the purpose. Later that afternoon, Hestia knocked gently on my office door. "You've got something," she said, holding out a cream-colored envelope. It had no return address, no postage, just my name, in handwriting that once filled the margins of my childhood notebooks. Varel. I opened it carefully. The letter inside wasn't long. It was from Kaylin, not typed, written. That alone surprised me. "I assume you've won, or are close enough it doesn't matter. I've had time to think. Not that it's helped much. You always wanted answers. I don't have any. I just keep wondering, do you really think she'd be proud of you doing all of this? Without me?" That question sat with me longer than I expected. I didn't hate him, not anymore. Hatred took energy, and mine was going somewhere better now. I folded the letter once, twice, then slid it into the drawer beside my mother's final words. He wasn't owed a reply, but he was owed the truth. The same truth he ran from. She wouldn't have been proud of me because I did it alone. She'd have been proud despite it. The real inheritance was never the company. It was never the power. It was seeing what she saw all along. I walked down the hall into the newly opened East Wing, now a gallery of restored blueprints and preserved designs. At the end of the room, in a quiet glass case under soft light, sat the bed. Polished, reassembled. Its secret panel opened just enough to reveal the blueprint tucked inside. Some visitors saw it and smiled. Others whispered, confused. One teenager pointed and said, "That's where it started." They weren't wrong. I stepped closer and read the etched plaque, the bed that carried a legacy. For a moment, I rested my hand on the glass. A goodbye. A beginning. That night, I sat by my apartment window, writing in a new journal, the kind with thick pages and no lines, just space for whatever needed to come out. They left me nothing. But somehow, it became everything. The broken bed, the buried blueprints, the truth they tried to hide. Success built on lies will always collapse. But truth? That will outlive us all. I closed the journal and looked out at the city. No fireworks. No headlines screaming my name anymore. Just quiet. And for the first time in years, I welcomed it. Sometimes what you inherit isn't money. It isn't a house, a name, or even the approval you spent a lifetime chasing. Sometimes what you inherit is a mess. A secret. A wound that no one warned you about. But I've learned that even a broken inheritance can become something powerful if you choose to rebuild it with truth. My story started with humiliation, a single splintered bed frame. But in the end, it gave me everything. The truth about who my mother was, the strength I didn't know I had, and the chance to rewrite what legacy really means. So let me ask you something. What are you carrying that might look like a burden, but could be hiding something bigger? A story waiting to be heard. A voice that's been silenced. A dream no one believed in, yet. I hope my journey reminds you that your worth isn't defined by what others give you, but by what you choose to create from it. If this story reached something in your heart today, leave a comment with a 1, or let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too, and if it didn't land for you, I'd still love to know why. This space is for all of us. And hey, if you're still watching, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story.